Hello, everybody. My name is Rick Fryer. I work for the Spokane Valley Fire Department, and what we're going to do today is kind of a hybrid. We can't do exactly what I do in the classroom, but I'm gonna go through it, talking to you like you're my sixth grade class, and then I'm gonna have the wall break where I'm gonna step out and kind of talk about why I do what I do. Real quick, I like to tell this story because I'm really not a self-promoter in any way, shape, or form. So the way I got the nickname, the Fire Science Guy, was somebody from Green Bay, Wisconsin, sent an email to my department asking, hey, we're looking for that fire science guy to come and speak. And so I thought the fire science guy sounds kind of fun. Let's do that. And so that's where the name came from. It was somebody asking after I presented at the NFPA conference back in 2018. So my email is thefirescienceguy@gmail.com. Like she said, there's the Fire Science Guy YouTube channel and Facebook. If you have questions, you can get a hold of me anyway through those things. And I hope this would be a really neat thing at the end of my career to have something like this go into a whole bunch of schools across the country. Without further ado, let's light this candle. Literally. Okay. So the way it works, sixth grade is where, if you watch the presentation at Vision 2020, you know that sixth grade is where I like to be. So at this point in time, you pretend to be a sixth grader and I'll pretend to be an instructor. Yeah. So I introduce myself. I come up there, and here's the thing: when it comes to sixth graders, in my opinion, it's good to be larger than life. I like to control the classroom, and I think that's a critical thing when it comes to learning. So I come in and I using my bearing and my posture that I learned from the Marine Corps, I will come in and say, hello class, my name is Rick Fryer. I work for the Spokane Valley Fire Department. I'm an investigator, and we're going to talk about the scientific method. How many of you heard of the scientific method? Inevitably, you'll have 3 people raise their hand. I'm like, you guys are all lying to me. I know you've heard it. It's science. So I have a conversation with them about the scientific method. Before we go into the program, I always use a little attention getter so I can get their attention and bring it back to me. And what I do is something that I've learned over time. I explain to the students, the rules. Okay, there's a whole bunch of you and there's one of me. If I say something and you want to share it with your friend, or you want to talk about something that I show you and get excited, I want that to happen, but I have to keep control of the class and we have to keep moving because we run short on time. I'm going to teach you something that I learned in the United States Marine Corps, MCRD San Diego. As a Marine, when I was in boot camp, the drill instructor, when he wanted to get our attention, all 80 of us, he would say the word ears. Everyone in the platoon would stop doing what they were doing, look at the drill instructor and say open. We're going to practice that. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 ears. You're going to go open. 1, 2, 3 ears. And the first time I get like whisper, like church mice, right? Ears, they barely say anything at all. So then I make a big deal about that. I'm like, wait a minute, did I say Boy Scouts or Marine Corps? I'm a little confused. And I said, here's the deal about Marines. When we want to be heard, we make sure we say it loud enough so we get heard. If it's important, you should speak up. And then I say, we don't scream like we're at a basketball game. We say it loud enough for people to hear. We're going to practice this one more time. 1, 2, 3 ears. It's a little louder. I say ears, gets a little louder. Ears. That third time, they're at that volume and intensity that I want them to be at almost every time. It does 2 things, in my opinion. One, it gets them woken up a little bit. It tells them that it's all right if they have something to say it a little bit louder so I can hear it. And the other thing is, it really does work. You show them something on a slide, and somebody answers a good question, somebody has a comment, and they start crumbling into the mob. I say ears, and it brings them right back to where I want them to be. So I don't know what you want to use, but if you want to steal that, I'm okay with it. Just tell them, hey, I knew this Marine, and this is what they do. So it's a fun way to grab their attention. We're going to go to the actual PowerPoint right now that they see at the time. So I use a PowerPoint in the presentation. It's very short, 14, 15 slides tops. There's not a lot of words on it. This is actually the only place where you're going to see a whole bunch of words. And it's because I don't want them to focus on this. I want them to focus more on the message. And I think most people in the younger generations are used to videos. They're used to people saying stuff and facial expressions. They're used to being entertained. So reading a book is kind of, unfortunately, foreign to most people. So this is the only place where I mention a lot of words. So I'll get up there and I'll say, look, this is a scientific method. And as a human being, we use this every single time we make a decision. Every single time we think of, go through a process and make a decision, we use this. Do you believe me when I say that? At this point, you're going to get a couple blank stares and you're going to be able to look at the crowd and say, that kid doesn't believe me. So I come up and I ask him, I said, do you believe me? And he goes, yep. I said, no, you don't. Yeah, no, I do. I said, no, you really don't. It's okay. And then I explained to him the cornerstone of science is doubt. We should have doubt. But the other thing that we need to do is we need to be willing to listen to somebody else's hypothesis and be honest and make a fair judgment of what they're trying to say. Science is constantly evolving and changing. That's just the way it works, right? I mean, so when it comes to experiments and other things, if we're kept in a bubble and just believe what we believe, then we're never really going to come to the truth. So that's kind of the thing. I want to encourage them to understand that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask why. So I get that kid to finally, flip and say, "Yep, I don't believe you." And I said, "Great. Are you gonna allow me to give you the opportunity? Will you give me the opportunity to change your mind?" And inevitably he says yes, because I'm 6 foot tall and 230 pounds standing right next to him. So then I point at the board here. I said, okay, let's talk about an event. Has anyone ever gotten home from school and realized you're hungry? And 5 people raised their hand. I said, you're all lying to me. Raise your hand. You've all gone home from school and been hungry. So they all raised their hand. And I said, okay, is being hungry a problem? Yes, it's a problem. So that's first step of the scientific method is you're hungry. The second thing is collect data. So as an investigator, collecting data is critical in us coming up with the right answer. When you get home, you're hungry, you've identified a problem. Now you need to start collecting data. And I ask, where do you do that at? How do you collect data when you're hungry? Some kid will raise their hand. You look in the fridge. Perfect. Then I'll get a cupboard. Then I'll get underneath my bed where I keep the Easter egg stuff. And then I'll get the pantry. I'll get the 7-Eleven. I'll get they'll just start, all of them will just fire out these things. I'm like, yes, you collect data, you collect data, you collect data. The funny thing is, very rarely does a kid say the freezer. And I'm baffled by that because that's where they keep the ice cream. So we get all these places where we're going to collect data. And so then I bring it back to the analyze, the next step of the scientific method. And again, this is all happening really quick. It's happening in our brain. It's just the way we solve problems. So I tell them, I said, you open up the refrigerator, you find a gallon of 2% milk and a bag of Brussels sprouts. Now, some of you, I can't see all your faces, but I'll guarantee you, some of you made a face like this when I said Brussels sprouts. Some of you probably had an audible response, ugh. In every class, kids do that. They'll go, ugh, or they'll grimace when I say Brussels sprouts. And I look right at them and I point at them, I said, you just analyzed the data that I gave you. You don't like Brussels sprouts, and I can tell by the reaction in your face. So you analyzed the data that I gave you. Now you go to the cupboard and you find Oreo cookies. I'll always get kids to go, yum. And I said, you're analyzing the data. You don't even realize it. I give you the data, you analyze it. And then I say this, I say, you are actually at the next step of this already. You're developing a hypothesis. You guys are thinking that if I take an ice cold glass of milk and I take that bag of Brussels sprouts and I start dunking them in that milk, I can solve my problem of hunger. Without fail, they'll grow gross. And I'll say, wait a minute. So here's the deal. You've already come up with a hypothesis and you've already tested it in your head. You told yourself that because I've had cookies and milk before, I know that is a good way to solve the hunger. Not necessarily good for you, but good way to solve the hunger. And it tastes good. So we take our past experiences and we use those to develop and test hypotheses. So I go through that process to explain to them that this is a natural way of doing things. And then I tell them, and this is why we use it to investigate fires. Forensic fire investigation uses the scientific method. I asked him at this point, I said, look, we've got about 45 minutes. Are you willing to go on a journey and learn about forensic fire investigation with me? The goal is to get a bunch of them to say yes, and in almost every case, I do. And I think, again, the first part of it is to be very excited about being there, no matter how tired you are, no matter how bad your back hurts, no matter what's going on. You gotta sell this from the beginning and be positive and have great body language. I think that's critical to teaching these kids. So at this point, I'm done with this particular slide. and we move on to the next level. Scientific method, identifying the problem. So as a fire investigator, what's my problem? I'll get the fire. I said, well, no, that's kind of everybody's problem. I'm looking for a specific problem as an investigator. After a couple answers and a couple tries, you know, save people's lives, put the fire out, all that stuff, someone says, how did the fire start? Now, when I get a good answer, a positive answer, I will play this up a little bit because I want other kids to participate. I want them to see the reward of getting the right answer or even participating in general. You know, there's never anything negative about a raised hand and an answer. But in this case, when it comes to positive, if a kid says, how did the fire start? I will say, hey, you know what? I'll move all the way to the other side of the room. And I said, I'm a little deaf from blowing stuff up in the Marine Corps. If you can, could you say that a little louder so everybody else can hear it? And I'll make them say it really loud. How'd the fire start? And then I'll say, let's see if that's the right answer. Survey says, you know, we'll make a game of it, right? I'll give them 1,000 points and then immediately tell them that the points mean nothing, but they have them. It really is a chance just to get them excited about getting the right answer. So I said, great, now let's ask another question. Why should we care? And it'll take a couple minutes, or a minute or so, but eventually someone will tell me so we can prevent them. Again, other side of the room, say it a little louder because I'm a little deaf. So we can prevent them, they'll shout out. I said, exactly. And I'll tell them, I'm in this classroom as an investigator to stop fires from happening. That's my goal. I'm going to teach you about science. I'm going to teach you about fire investigation, but my goal is to prevent fires from happening. I'm old, I'm tired, I just don't want to go to these things anymore. So the second step, we've identified the problem. Now we're going to collect data or data, depending on how you want to say it. And you may have figured this out already, but I like to talk a little bit. So one of the most helpful ways of solving a problem is by interviewing, talking to other people. So I'll explain to them that when I go to a fire scene, I will speak to everyone that lives in the house. If there were people spending the night, I'll talk to them. I explain that I talk to everyone in the house, every single person. I especially want to talk to the males between the ages of 10 and 14 years old. Let me say it one more time. I especially want to talk to the males between the ages of 10 and 14 years old. And everybody will go, ooh, because there's a bunch of 12-year-olds in the class, right? And then I'll say, why? A girl will raise her hand and she says, because boys are stupid. I'm like, well, not all boys, but maybe that's not the answer I'm looking for. Then one of the boys will stand up and say, because we're more curious. I said, well, maybe. Or then one of the boys will raise their hand and say, well, it's because we remember things better and can give you more information. I'm like, maybe not. Someone will say, because we like lighting fires. I said, exactly. We talk to every single person in the house. I'll give them an example. I've even interviewed a 3-year-old little boy. This little guy, he just turned 3, probably about 2 weeks before the fire. When I show up on the scene, the fire happened in his room and it spread to the rest of the house. So I talked to this little guy and I come up and I ask him, I said, I'm holding a lighter in my hands like this. And I said, did you use this? And he looked at me and he shook his little head and he said, that one doesn't work. I almost fell over when he said that. I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, which one did you use? And he looked at me and cocked his head again. He said, I used the IT one. And I'm using that IT one and talking like this little 3-year-old because I want the kids to really listen. And I try to make the story, quite honestly, a little funny. And so eventually one kid will say, he means the white one. And I'm like, yes. And then I'll say, I asked the little 3-year-old boy, I said, what'd you do with it? And he says, I put the fire on the bed. That's a big laugh line for all the kids. And once they're done with the laughing, I said, I told that story so it'd be a little funny because I want you to remember it. Because here's where it becomes not funny. The little boy burned both his hands and his house down. Where do you think he learned how to use a lighter? the kids will all say, you know, parents, you know, television, stuff like that. And then I say, well, what about their older brothers and sisters? Do you think they watch their siblings? Do you think they learn from them? And then I remind them that their little brothers and sisters look up to them. They think they're cool. They want to copy them. They want to be like them. I had a little brother and sister when I was in school, and honestly, I wish I would have known that they thought I was cool, because they were the only people that thought I was cool. No one else did. I said, they want to be like you. So if you goof around with this stuff in front of them, they're going to do it too. What I'm asking you today, again, you remember my story. I said I want to prevent fires from happening. Well, this is one way we can do that. If you all make a pledge to me today to help your mom and dad who are busy, they are doing all kinds of stuff. They're cooking, they're cleaning, they're running you from soccer practice to basketball practice. They go to work, they're busy. So every now and then, we as parents forget and we leave something like this laying around. If you have little brothers and sisters, here's what I want you to do. Protect them and make sure these things are put away. So I make them raise their right hand, and I make them swear. I said, I swear to help mom and dad keep liars away from little brothers and sisters. I really tried to drive that point home. Their behavior is going to impact their brothers and sisters' behavior. And I said, the good news is the little boy survived, but all their stuff is gone, all of it. So I try to drive that home. I try to show them that the carelessness of leaving a lighter around could lead to consequences that they can't deal with. So interviewing is a huge deal. I also come up with another little story. It's a 14-year-old boy. So I'll start so after I tell them the little kid story, I said, you want to hear another true story? And they said, yep, because they really like the stories. I said, okay, so it's a beautiful sunny day toward the end of the school year, and I get called to a fire on 4th Avenue. When I show up, there's a bunch of fire trucks because there's a fire, and there's my buddy Pete from the police academy. So I go over and ask Pete, I say, hey, Pete, what happened? He said, Rick, I got here first, and when I showed up, there was fire and smoke coming out of the back of the house, and that kid on the bicycle, he's the one that called 911. I said, awesome. So I say, hey, Pete, do me a favor, watch the kid, tell him I need to talk to him. I'm going to go and do some science stuff, take some pictures, do some measurements, some flame vector analysis. I'm going to, go do some stuff you don't understand. It's science. I'm going to go figure it out. So I go inside, come back out, and I go up and talk to this kid. So I will pick a young man in the crowd, and I will walk up, and I will hold out my hand to shake his, and I will say, hey, how you doing? My name is Rick Fry. I work for the Spokane Valley Fire Department. I'm also commissioned deputy sheriff. And the kids will all laugh a little bit. And this kid will be shaking my hand. And I'll say, what's your name? And he'll tell me his real name. I'll shake my head. No, your name's Steve. And he goes, Steve. Okay. So I'll pretend he's the kid I'm interviewing, and I'll talk to him. And this is kind of how that goes. I said, hey, Steve, my name is Rick. The introduction's over. I said, do you mind if I ask you a couple questions? The kid will go, yes. Or he'll say no, and okay. So what'd you see? And so then I'll give Steve the answer about what he saw. He said, well, I was riding my bike, I saw the smoke, and I called 911. I said, that's everything? And then the kid that I'm talking to will look at me puzzled. I'll nod my head, and he'll go, yes. And then I'll talk to him. And then I mentioned to the kids that I'm talking to him for a few other minutes, right? Asking some other questions. And then I come to the end of the story where it really becomes fun. So I said, I finished up one question, and I asked Steve. I said, Steve, can I ask you one more question before I get on with my day? And I nod my head again. The young man will go, yes. I said, can you explain to me why there are burn marks on your shoes and your backpack? At that point, all the kids will go, oh. And when I look at the kid that I'm talking to, he'll go, or he'll say another little, something like that. And if he doesn't say anything, I'll lean over and I'll say, when I ask you the question, go, and again, it's a little bit of fun. And I'm telling a story about a 14-year-old that made a really bad choice. Once the kid says, then I'll say, not only did he say, but he also did a couple other things. I said, are you guys familiar with body language and how that works? And some of them will say yes, and others will look at me like I've got something growing on my head. And I'll say, here's the deal. Experts think that up to 80% of how we communicate is not with words that we say. It's our body language. It's our facial expressions, our gestures, that sort of thing. And I'll remind them that you've been watching me teach this class, I've been standing up straight, I've been speaking loudly, I've been making sure that my hand gestures are appropriate with the conversation I'm having. If it's information, I'm going to make a gesture to give that information to you. So that's body language. What this young man did when he said was also present body language. And here's what he did. He took a step away from me. He crossed his arms like this and he dropped his head down. And I'll say, what does that mean? What does dropping your head down mean? And they'll all say guilt and all this other stuff. But and then I stopped and I said, no, it can mean sadness. It can mean a couple other things. I said, that's one part of the body language. And then I'll mention the cross the arms thing. And I'll mention that it could be cold. It could be they're protecting themselves. Subconsciously, this is all important. And I'll have them call out major organs. And I'll say, when you do this, you could be cold, you could be angry, or you could be protecting your upper body. So I'm walking through the science of body language with them and letting them know that as investigators, we're trained to look at that stuff. We're trained to be able to say if somebody may or may not be telling us the whole truth, right? So I'm trying to convince upon them that it's not a good idea to lie to law enforcement. It's not a good idea to lie in general because people can tell. So the end of the story is that once I get through all the body language stuff, I talk about, I said, how do I go? Okay, so I asked the question. I ask, did Steve get in trouble that day? And they go, yep. And then I'll ask them, why did Steve get in trouble? And they'll say that, well, he trespassed. He broke into a house that wasn't his and he lit a fire. They'll go down that list. And I said, you're right. All that stuff's correct. But why did Steve get in trouble? And they'll look at me like I'm crazy because they just gave me the answer. I said, no, Steve got in trouble because he earned it. Steve made a bad choice and he earned what he got. And then I'll look at a kid. I said, did you make Steve do it? No. Did you make Steve do it? No. I said, Steve got in trouble because he made 3 bad choices. He jumped a fence that wasn't his. He broke into a house that wasn't his and he lit it on fire. Now, do you think Steve got in trouble? And they'll go, yes. And then I'll say, so let me tell you what he did good. Steve called 911. He stayed there, and eventually he told the truth. Do you think he got in less trouble for that? Some kids will say no, and I'll nod my head. And I say, yes, he got in less trouble for that because I wrote down in my report that he stayed there, called 911, and told the truth. Those are big things. I said, he made 3 bad choices. Is Steve a bad kid? Some kids will say yes, and I'll say no. I said, look, here's the way it works. My dad told me that the world will judge you by what you do afterwards. Not what you did, but what you do afterwards. I said, if Steve takes care of the problems, does all the things he needs to do, and never does it again, is Steve a bad kid? No. I said, now if Steve gets out from juvenile detention, doesn't solve all the problems, has no remorse, and continues to do it, is Steve a bad kid then? I'm willing to have a conversation. But I'm not going to call him a bad kid for making a bad choice. Not the first time. That's just not right. So I stress upon them the importance of telling the truth, making a better choice, and realizing that choice leads to a consequence. It's not an accident that house caught on fire. So we talk about interviewing because it's a great thing to do. Again, we talk to everybody that lives in the house. We talk to the people that call 911. Steve called 911. And then we also talk to the fire crews. So here's an interesting thing. I make sure I tell them that fire crews can give us some great information because they are usually driving to the scene. And on occasion, they see someone running away. And I look at the kids and I say, is that normal to see people running away from a fire? And some of them will say yes. I say, well, you're right if they're running out of a house that's burning. But if they're running down the street 2 blocks away, heading in the opposite direction, is that normal? Because my experience is that people want to go to the fire and see what's going on. They're curious. They get in our way. It's not normal. And then I bring up the fact that, hey, you know what? As a matter of fact, about a week ago, in a house not too far from your school, the fire department was driving to the fire, and they saw 2 kids walking away or running away from the fire. And then this is a little bit of fun for me more than them, is I'll take a look at 2 young guys, and I'll remember what they're wearing, and I'll give a description. I said, and the fire department said they saw 2 young guys run away. One had dark hair, one had light hair. One was wearing a gray sweatshirt with blue shorts and white shoes. So I'll describe these 2 individuals, and then inevitably the kids will start to laugh a little bit, and I'll look around like, what are you guys laughing about? And then I'll look at these 2 kids that match the description I just gave, and I'll say, hey, fellas, we need to talk. This is crazy. And the kids will all laugh. And this is when I do my ears thing. I bring them back. I said, is it possible that I was able to look at these two individuals, remember what they were wearing, and put them in the story that they actually didn't light a fire? And again, it's just another way to kind of keep them engaged, right? And the thing that I try to do is the kids that aren't answering questions, I look at them quite a lot. I want them to be in the process. So I'll encourage them, you know. And when it comes to the kids that aren't paying attention, I admit it, I'll use them too as the description, right? I'll put them back in the game. They're part of the story because their clothes match this crazy fireman story. So we'll, in this case, I said, you know, I say, well, I made that up. It was a little bit fun. I just want to have some fun. And then I'll say, let me tell you an actual true story again. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. I showed up at a fire and I'm tired and my eyes are, you know, I'm rubbing my eyes and I'm looking for my flashlight, the big mag lights that cops carry. And I'm going through the back of my F-150 and I finally find it. When I grab it, I turn around and I shut the door and there's a firefighter standing right behind me. And then, has there ever been a case where you guys have been there and you turn around and someone's there and they scare you because you didn't know where they were there? Well, the same thing happened here. When I turned around, I jumped back and the fireman jumped back and we both scared each other. And he apologizes real quick for scaring me. And I said, what do you want? And he says, well, I just wanted to let you know, Rick, that the door to the house that was on fire was kicked in. And I said, the door to the house? And he goes, yeah, the door to the house. I said, the door to the what house? He said, the one that's on fire. So I collected this bit of information that the door was kicked in. And now I ask the kids, okay, so I go up and I look at the house and sure enough, the door's been kicked in. Is that an important piece of data? And then the kids will start, you know, commenting amongst themselves and they'll be like, yeah, it's an important piece of data. So I point at one and I'll say, well, what does the data mean? Well, we're analyzing it right now. Why is the door kicked in a big deal? And he goes, well, somebody kicked it in and tried to burn the house down and kill everybody. I'm like, okay, Darth Vader, evil, I got it. You're on the dark side of the force. You say something bad happened. Great. I said, is there another reason why the door could be kicked in? And they say, and then one kid will raise their hand. Somebody was trying to save somebody. I'm like, exactly. Good side of the force, right? You're Luke Skywalker. He's Darth Vader. We got evil and good. So there's 2 reasons for this to be kicked in. So then I pull the coin out of my pocket. I said, hey, guys, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm tired. I want to go home and go to bed. We just collected some data. We analyzed the data. How about if I take this coin, I put good is on heads and tails is bad, and I flip it. It's a good fire. I can go home. How's that work? Surprisingly, the kids get kind of upset about that. They want to hear the rest of the story. They're like, no, that's not the way the scientific method works. You don't get a guess. You've got to do more. You've got to collect more information. I said, okay, you guys want to listen to more of this then? And they say yes, and we'll keep moving forward. So I actually show them a real fire scene. And at the top of the screen here, I don't know if you can see my arrow, but I hope you can. I said there's a chair, table, and a chair. Do you guys see the chair, table, and chairs? No, you don't. They're burned up. This carpet right here is white. Can you tell? No, you can't. It's burned up. I said, what I want you to understand here is, this is the living room here, lots of fire. And over here by this end of the house, that's where the door is that was kicked in. This little triangle down here, that's the TV stand. I'm going to show it to you. So as I walk through this house, I recognize the door's kicked in, but also I recognize the TV stand is knocked over. So let's take another look at the TV stand. So here's our TV stand right here. It used to be sitting right there. The piece of data is the TV stand's knocked over. Why is that important? What does that mean? We're collecting the data. Now we're analyzing it as well. Why is the TV stand knocked over? The kid that said somebody broke in to burn down the house, he said somebody came in and knocked it over. And I'm okay with that, you know. But then I say, well, let's do some more analyzing. I said, inside the TV stand, I found a cable box, an Xbox, a Wii, a PlayStation, and a DVD player. And then I'll stop. And then I'll say, is there anything missing? Eventually, one kid who noticed there's no TV sitting here will say the TV's missing. I'm like, excellent. So the TV's missing. The TV stand's knocked over, the door's kicked in. 3 pieces of data. Can we make a conclusion now? We're analyzing the data. What does that mean? Obviously, the kid that said the door was kicked in, they kicked in the door, they stole the TV, knocking over the stand, and they lit the house on fire. I'm like, excellent. I said, is there any other reason why that TV stand could be knocked over? And they give me a blank look. And I said, you know, believe it or not, I've seen people that have a house fire saved stuff like a television. They'll grab it and run outside the house. I said, is it possible that that happened? And they're like, yeah, I guess so. So again, we're at the point where we flip a coin. I said, we can still do this. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning now. I'm ready to go home. And they're like, no, we can't do that. That's just not right. It's not science. So I'm excited that they're kind of thinking like that, right? So then I said, okay, well, let's take a look, closer look and let's investigate some more and collect some more data. So then I say, this is the TV stand. When I reach down and lift up this TV stand, I notice the carpet underneath is not burned. What does that mean? And they'll be thinking about it for a second, and then one of them or two will say, the TV stand was knocked over before the fire. I said, you're right. That's awesome. Absolutely correct. Why? And they'll kind of give me a blank stare. And this is where we can talk about what fire needs, what fire has to have to work. I said, so in my opinion, Rick Fryer, the investigator, my humble opinion, heat is the most important thing. If you don't have sufficient amount of heat, you're not going to get the fuel to burn. And then I asked him about what kind of fuels burn. I said, have you guys, what if I told you that the only type of fuel that will burn, the only state of matter that will burn is a gas, would you believe me? And most of the kids will say no. And I'm like, okay, so you doubt me because you've seen a campfire and you see wood burn. He's like, absolutely. I'm okay. Okay. Well, what if I told you that in order for that wood to burn, it has to get to a certain temperature and has to turn to a gas and then burn? Would you believe me? And of course they say yes. I said, you believe me because I'm just telling you that, but there's ways we can tell. There's ways we can do this. And so at this point, we've been talking for a long time, right? So at this point, there's a couple things you can do.